Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Lisa Love, and this is Revelation and Esoteric Look, Part 3. Revelation is a book in the Christian Bible that, let me move this little video myself so I can read it, is thought by traditionally exoterically minded Christians to predict the end times. And the book is divided into 22 chapters, and we're going to talk about that later in this video towards the end. Throughout thousands of years, people have looked for these end times to come. But could it be that the end times are always here and the themes in Revelation repeat themselves over and over again? This video series makes that case, showing how Revelation is a symbolic teaching that is easily deciphered by those who understand its esoteric meanings of revealing the war between material and spiritual values that each of us must apply to our everyday lives. And there is an exoteric approach where we're focusing on the outer world of the five senses. And the idea is to have dominion or domination over everybody else. And that feeds the idea of selfishness and separation. And it creates a world of separation and division where we have he versus she, and one race versus another, and one worldview versus another, one religion versus another. And that destroys unity. And it also falsely believes in a material reward system by if you're in the right group or right club, you get all the goodies here on earth or in heaven elsewhere. And that can even glorify the destruction of the earth in the belief that if you're chosen over others, you get saved and others don't. That's basically eating of the tree of good and evil. The esoteric approach is a focus on the inner world beyond what the five senses reveals. The idea is to have dominion over yourself and your negative tendencies. And it feeds the capacity to create unity, compassion, and love. Now, you don't get rid of diversity, you appreciate it, but you learn how to unify with it, to respect it, to enjoy it, to no longer fear it, to love it. And that creates a world of peace, the New Jerusalem, where all people's views and all races are harmonized together so that our earth is purified, cherished, and respected. And that's eating of the tree of life. Now, we've already gone through the first video where we went through the first 4 chapters, where St. John in the exoteric version went into a mystical state, entered a throne room, basically had kind of a strange looking acid trip, and all these strange things happened, including being given 7 lampstands with 7 stars. And the esoteric version is St. John went into a meditative state known as samadhi, was asked by the divine, he'll be able to open the 7 chakras and enters the throne room along with him. And video 2 then elaborated on the idea that St. John was given a scroll with 7 seals on it and was asked who would open the seals, and basically the seals started to be opened. 6 of the seals were opened and 144,000 people were sealed. And the esoteric version is the 7 chakras, and their 144,000 points or petals are opened. And those who have opened them correctly, because they've been purified enough, enter the throne room where, like the 24 elders or 24 hours in a day and 7 chakras, you 24/7 are aware of your divinity, and you've achieved what's known as Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Now we're going to go through opening the 7th seal and having 7 trumpets show up and sound, having an angel present another scroll for St. John to eat, and 2 olive trees appear as prophets. 2 more woes will happen. The first woe happened here in video 2. I'm going to get my pointer in video 2. And then we're going to have the 7th trumpet sound, and we'll be done with this video. So the exoteric version will be trumpets are sounded, destruction occurs, 2 olive trees give warnings. The esoteric version is the chakras are activated through sound. A warning is given that without enough purification of our negative tendencies, then a dragon, Kundalini energy, will arise, and it will not go up the spiritual channel, the sushumna. It will go in the right and left channels of Ida and Pingala, and destruction and division will occur. So, chapter 8 of Revelation starts with the 7th seal being opened. And as it's open, there is silence in heaven for about half an hour. And then 7 angels appear with 7 trumpets. But before the trumpets are sounded, another angel comes along and stands at an altar with a golden censer. Here's a golden censer with incense in it. And that is mingled with the prayers of the saints in the throne room. And then an angel fills the censer with fire from the altar and throws it down on earth, causing peals of thunder, loud noises, flashes of lightning, and earthquakes. So what is silence? Silence is both a pause to think about what might happen next and an opportunity to be free from thought so that intuition can prevail and move us into right action. As for the golden censer, it is where the incense and prayers of the saints are mixed. Now notice how the word censer with an E is like censor with an O. And this word conveys something or someone that must be silenced, which is interesting to me because I have been preparing this video for months, but I'm recording it the day after Joe Biden got elected as president in the United States. And just before that, there was like this battle, and then somebody was censored, silenced. It kind of was interesting because as we go through this video, you might be aware of the parallels going on within our planet. That's because our planet is going through an awakening, as I'm describing in this video. This can happen to us individually, it can happen to our planet, and it happens to our planet periodically. So as with the prayer, some exoteric people believe that the saints are actually praying for the destruction of all the evil humans who did not get the seal on their foreheads, as 144,000 did. As I said in video 2 in this series, if you want to be literal, that means most of us should just pray for destruction quickly when the trumpets sound, because, you know, in order to be 144,000, St. John says, you have never had sex with a woman, you've been totally pure and never told a lie, you've been chaste. Which means what? I joked in the last video. If you have sex, it can be with a man, but they don't want homosexuality either. You're totally pure, you've never told a lie. Well, you know, we're going to have kids. It's got to be immaculate conception or artificial insemination. I mean, what are we talking about here? That's the exoteric version. From an esoteric point of view, what St. John says still has some relevance in that what he's saying is we have to become pure. Only in that way will we light the 7 lamps. The stars, they kind of look like stars, will show up, and all the points of the stars, 144,000, or the petals of the flowers. In the East, it's symbolized as lotus flowers. St. John is symbolizing them as stars, will be opened. Having gone through so much purification, then I think it's highly unlikely these saints are going to pray for vengeance and desire in their hearts that there will be the destruction of almost the entire human race. I think that kind of cruelty would have been driven out of their psyches long ago. And actually, that kind of desire for vengeance is mine is more eating of the tree of good and evil, making us divisive, afraid, leading us to want to separate from others, wanting us to even get rid of others so we feel safe. 144,000, though, have eaten from the tree of life. They've made enough unifications that they act with compassion, wisdom, justice, fairness, and love. And that makes, in my mind, the saints want to pray that we'll make those unifications so we don't suffer either. So more likely, I think the saints are praying that humanity will wake up, purify themselves, and be spared any negative fate that might await them. Let's look now at 2 trees. I've mentioned the tree of good and evil and the tree of life. What are these trees? Well, for starters, within every human being, we could say 2 trees exist. These trees make up the nervous system, which has its roots in the brain and then branches out. Roots in the brain, branches out to the body. The main tree engages the central nervous system, which goes from the brain down the central spine. But this tree branches out, here it branches out, see this? Into 2 parts. The sympathetic nervous system, which heightens our awareness and connects us to the male tendency to move into action, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms things down and connects to the female tendency to relax and be still. And I put this kind of world tree here because it has that same symbolism of the roots up here and then branching out. Now let's look at the yoga tradition and how they see these trees. Actually, now we have the Ida, and this should have a P there. It's down here, and the pingala. And that's what we're going to see is the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system and the sushumna, the central nervous system. I'm kind of giving away what I just said here. So let me say that. And notice how, like, if we take the Ida, the parasympathetic nervous system, it goes back and forth and then ends up in the left nostril, and its symbol is the moon. And the pingala ends up in the right nostril, and its symbol is the sun. That's why you do pranayama techniques, breathing techniques with alternate nostril breathing to try and balance these two channels out. When these channels are kept pure, these trees work together and create a smooth flow of energy throughout the body. As they do, they stimulate the chakras, the 7 lamps. Here you see the chakras here. In a harmonious way, the tree of life is accessed, leaving the sushumna, the crown chakra, the throne room, in charge of the process. However, when the channels are not kept pure, the energy is inverted and it runs out of the crown chakra and brain in an inharmonious way. And it gives the lower chakras too much power. And an imbalance takes place as Ida and Pingala, left and right, male and female, good and evil, fight each other. And that's the tree of good and evil. Now, the tree of life consists of 2 poles, so to speak. At the North Pole is the Sahasrara, or crown chakra, or the throne room, that feeds consciousness to the body. How awake, aware, and capable we are of unity, love, wisdom, and truth depends on how many points of the stars or petals of the lotuses we've been able to light. At the South Pole is the seat of life that sits within the Muladhara, or base of the spine chakra. And this is a storehouse of energy that gives power to the levels of consciousness that exist within the other chakras or lamps, which is why it's so important that we light these stars or these petals correctly so that the darkened levels of consciousness do not take hold and dominate, causing division and discord. Now, most of humanity lives within here, here, and here. I'm oversimplifying it to make it easy for you to see. They are focused primarily on money and security, food, shelter, clothing, pleasure, entertainment, sex, and power. Look at just about any media, go down any street, and you will see that. It's primarily restaurants, it's primarily entertainment, or Victoria's Secret so you can enhance your sex life, and about getting power, worshiping power, superheroes, people in power, or wanting to keep the power and being, quote, evil, lived spelled backwards, a devil, lived spelled backwards, so you can maintain power and keep everybody else who's in the out group from having it. That's the tree of good and evil. That creates division and discord. Let's look a little bit more at Kundalini, which is basically the life force that many spiritual traditions symbolize as a serpent. Now, in the Western traditions, that serpent is seen as evil because it's associated with the tree of good and evil, where in the Garden of Eden, we woke up and understood our separation and division from each other, male against female. Cain against Abel, 2 brothers, one brother killing the other, etc., etc. It's a story of division. Now, in the East, that's not the case. The snake is not an evil being. It's a being that is worshipped because it's part of the tree of life. It's going straight up the sushumna, the central channel. Now, the word Kundalini is interesting because it means both circular and annular. It has a cycle to it. Now, ideally, this serpent or Kundalini rests quietly in its cave at the bottom of the spine, feeding the body with its energy. However, there are times, it's a cycle, when it wakes up. We'll talk about it in a dragon in the next slide. And it starts to undulate itself and goes up the spine, giving power to the consciousness stored within the chakras, for better or worse. Now, I've put this picture of the spine here for a reason. This is from a chiropractor. Here's where you can get that print if you want it. In that it kind of looks like a dragon from the top, looking at the top of a dragon here. Here's the head. And it kind of looks like a snake. Here's the tail, or the rattle down here, here. Interesting how you have both as you look at the spine. Now, again, in the West, we mainly see the dragon as a symbol for Kundalini. Why? Because the serpent's been given bad press. It's basically Kundalini in its negative element as it arises and creates good and evil. And the dragon is more the symbol that is worshipped in either a good way. In the Chinese Eastern tradition, you see the risen dragon as a very good, happy dragon celebrating. Or in a bad way, St. John has the dragon rise and it creates trouble. Like the snake, the dragon lives in a cave, and that cave is often said to be full of gold. Here's the dragon here, kind of looped around like the serpent, sitting on top of all this gold. Gold symbolizes the precious resources of the earth that can be tapped into and exploited for better or worse, depending on the level of consciousness accessing the power through Kundalini. Though the snake is seen as a symbol in the Judeo-Christian tradition, St. John refers to it as a dragon. And at times this dragon wakes up and spreads its wings. It leaves the cave and takes flight in the world for better or worse. And we see this in Revelations. One of the reasons Kundalini means annular, again, is its cycle. And there are cycles in time when the dragon is set to leave its cave, when Kundalini is going to rise. And St. John actually refers to these cycles in Revelation when he talks about the dragon taking flight, but then being thrown back down only to rise 1,000 years later. So these cycles represent opportune times for an awakening or initiation or expansion of consciousness, an enlightenment experience to happen if used correctly. It's my belief that the earth is actually going through one of those right now. And that's why we're seeing so much turmoil happening. And that was one of the reasons I got impelled to get this esoteric version of Revelations out there sooner, because I feel we're going through this kind of experience. I want to play a very brief clip from the movie Excalibur. It's one of my favorite movies. And this is the Arthurian legend, the legend of King Arthur. The young man there is King Arthur. The older man with the strange cap is Merlin. And Arthur has just pulled the sword from the stone in the movie, similar to when the sword comes out of the mouth of the Alpha and Omega in Revelations, and we see St. John having that Excalibur, that sword, being presented. Arthur has just had Excalibur presented to him, and now he's being introduced to the dragon.
What are you afraid of?
I don't know.
Shall I tell you what's out there?
Yes, please.
The dragon. A beast of such power that if you were to see it whole and all complete in a single glance, it would burn you to cinders.
Where is it?
It is everywhere. It is everything. Its scales glisten in the bark of trees. Its roar is heard in the wind, and its forked tongue strikes like... Oh, like lightning. Yes, that's it.
How can I... What should I... Must I...
Do nothing. Be still. Sleep. Rest in the arms of the dragon. Dream.
I love that movie. And if you watch it, you will be really amazed at, if you've seen this video, you'll start to understand the symbolism there as well. So now I'd like to introduce Kundalini as a Caduceus. This is Kundalini in its fully risen state of consciousness. Here we see these two snakes that have woven their way back and forth around the central channel, the Ida Pingala of the sushumna, bringing greater life and energy and healing to any organism, be it the planet, the solar system, or the galaxy. That healing happens when the Ida and the Pingala, the two snakes, are in balance. It also happens when the dragon has risen and spreads its wings. That's also connected to opening the Ajna center, the third eye. We'll talk more about that later. So Kundalini has woken up. It has risen. And the Alpha and the Omega, the scroll that was given by the Alpha and Omega, has unrolled itself, and it has expanded the consciousness So that ideas, people, and entities that previously had stood on each side of the tree and fought each other are now unified and can live in greater harmony. If, however, when the cycle comes and not enough purification work has taken place, then battles, difficulties, disasters, and even disease occurs. And in 2021, having just gotten through 2020, we kind of see how that's been really happening on our earth. Battles, difficulties, disasters, and a coronavirus disease happening because not enough purification happened ahead of time. In summary, we've seen how St. John has gone into the throne room. This was from video 1. He had a revelation that a time for awakening is here. Time's here. Time's up. Whether we're ready for it or not, it's going to happen. And he's presented with a scroll and weeps because he worries nobody can open the scroll. And he's told that those who follow the Lamb, who are willing to sacrifice their impure tendencies, will be able to open the scroll in the right way, Kundalini. In preparation for this awakening, St. John gives guidance to us as the seals are broken, as the kind of purifications that must take place to avoid the dangers that will happen. Prayers have been said. The time is here. Now the trumpets are going to be sounded, lighting the lamps. I like that, lighting the lamps in this video, or activating the chakras. As they're activated, will we make ourselves fit to enter that throne room so we can have a revelation of the real, who we really are as spiritual beings, and eat of the tree of life? Or will it activate the unreal, our deluded ideas of who we think we are, of who others are, of what the world is really all about, and throw us out of Eden as we sadly now eat of the tree of good and evil, making death, division, disease, and destruction happen on earth? As a little side note, I love in this video this throne room. It kind of looks like the bottom of this crystal clear throne room here, doesn't it? And here we have the word symbolized here, the Amen, the Om, or the Om, the word, the Alpha and Omega that John talks about in the Bible. Time has come, whether we're ready or not, events are going to happen. Expansion of consciousness, initiation will take place. The saints who have purified the 144,000 points of the stars or petals of the lotus flowers are praying that those who are going to go through these events have done their purification work so that when they take place, expansions of consciousness will be happened to the degree that this will be as harmonious as possible. Otherwise, things will get worse. So here we go back to Revelations. And now we're going to look at the 7 trumpets with the 7 angels sounding the trumpets and what St. John says about it before I give you the esoteric version. So the first trumpet sounds, and sadly, hail, fire, and blood fall on earth, and 1/3 of the earth is burned up. 1/3 of all trees and grasses are burned up. And I like this artist that I got here. Don't know who it was, got it from the internet, because it shows that. Second trumpet sounds, and a mountain erupts with fire. It's like a volcano, and throws fire into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea is now full of blood. And 1/3 of all living creatures and 1/3 of all ships are destroyed. A third trumpet sounds and makes a star called wormwood, a meteor, fall from heaven to earth, and 1/3 of all rivers and fountains are destroyed, and the water is too bitter to drink on 1/3 of the earth. A fourth trumpet sounds, and light is lost from 1/3 of the sun, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of all of the stars. So that basically we only have light for 8 hours of a day here. Now, what's kind of interesting is our earth really is going through this kind of initiation. We are having grasses and trees being destroyed. We are having our seas being filled with pollution. We are having our waters becoming too bitter to drink. Fortunately, we haven't had this yet, unless we see it symbolically, which we'll look at shortly. A fifth trumpet sounds, and a star falls to earth, and another meteor, and it opens a shaft to a bottomless pit, and a snake and smoke emerges. And then these strange creatures called locusts come out. And notice they have human faces, crowns like gold, hair like women's hair. They have teeth like a lion, scales like breastplates, wings, tails like a scorpion. And they torture men for 5 months and kill all those who are not sealed, 144,000. And they don't touch or kill grass or trees, interestingly enough. And they have a king. The locust king is called Abaddon, in Hebrew, Apollon. And the Greek name is Apollon. The Hebrew name is Abaddon. And all this is so terrible, everybody hopes to die. These are the other locusts following the locust king here. I wanted to give credit, but this was cut off when I got it from the internet. Then a sixth trumpet sounds, releasing 4 angels who let go the river Euphrates. And with the river Euphrates, horsemen are sent out to kill 1/3 of mankind through fire, sulfur, and smoke. So now we only have 2/3 of humanity. 1/3 was killed from the plagues earlier in the video 2, and now we've got the locust killing another 1/3 along with the river Euphrates. So we have 1/3 of humanity left. But St. John says they have still not given up worshiping demons, idols of gold, silver, bronze, wood, and have not repented their murders, sorceries, immoralities, or theft. So things don't look too good. 6 trumpets have been sounded. Some of this kind of looks like it's happening. You know, you could see the locust as human beings coming out, you know, wanting to take over the earth, those in the lower chakras wanting to come out and take over the earth in a unhealthy way. But as they take over the earth, they still worship idols of gold. They still worship the material world, basically. They still commit immoralities and theft. Now, before we go into the esoteric interpretation, I want to say one more thing about the exoteric interpretation here. So speaking of those who are left, the 1/3 that are left, this is a book called Left Behind. This is a fictional series of books written between 1995 and 2007. And it borrows from prophecies in the biblical books of Daniel, Isaiah, Ezekiel, but mainly Revelation. And over 65 million copies of these books have been sold, with the vast majority being sold in the United States. 65 million copies is about 1/8 of all human beings on the planet, but most of it's in the United States. So that's about 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of every 4 humans in the United States have been exposed to these books. And if you add in the influence of movies, video games, children's books, and various sermons on these books, it might be that 1/7 of all human beings on the planet, and most likely 1 out of every 3 US citizens, are familiar with the ideas in these books. In fact, the USA Christian evangelical Jerry Falwell has said about the first book in the series, which has had, at this point, when the picture was taken, 63 million copies sold. It's been a lot more since then. Jerry Falwell says, in terms of its impact on Christianity, it's probably greater than that of any other book in modern times outside of the Bible. So it's very important to know the exoteric interpretation of these books, because they have become very important, especially in the United States. They are fiction, but most people in the United States that are exoterically minded don't treat them as fiction. They treat them as something that they're actually hoping will happen. So to begin with, unlike the statement of 144,000 people being sealed in Revelation and being taken up into heaven, the Left Behind series says that millions of believers in Jesus Christ will suddenly be raptured, taken up, or kind of beamed up into heaven because they were good enough for Jesus to take away. And billions will be left behind on earth. 144,000 go too, but actually they kind of stay behind to kind of help. But this exoteric version is really dangerous because a lot of people believe that they just have to believe in Jesus, their version of Jesus, according to what their teaching or their pastor or their tribal idea teaches them. They believe, they just believe, they're out of here, they're gone. They don't have to do any work. And they'll just simply be up in heaven, and when all the destruction is over, they'll come back and live in the New Jerusalem. That's literally how they're taking it. And to let you know, despite the fact that these are stated to be fictional events, I already said millions of people are believing and now looking for and trying to create the events in these books to happen. Of course, all this exoteric interpretation is a distortion of what St. John and other prophetic books in the Bible are saying. Now, instead of having to clean up your inner life through yoga, meditation, and introspection, the esoteric teaching, you just have to prepare for the end times that will involve 7 years of tribulation. Tribulation force is created to survive the catastrophes that will happen when the 6 trumpets sound. And the only way out of this dark period is to figure out who is the Antichrist and to kill that person along with anybody associated with them. Now, their Antichrist is a white male who, interestingly enough, appears, first of all, as a really peaceful human being who works with the United Nations, who's going to do good things. But he is a non-believer in your version of who Jesus is and your interpretation of biblical events. In fact, in the Left Behind series, it was criticized because all Protestants went up, no Catholics, which is, again, kind of dangerous because even though the author said, no, I didn't mean it that way, a lot of people take these fictional books literally and think if a Catholic white man who's a politician, who is peaceful, who works with the United Nations arrives, that person is the Antichrist. And later that Antichrist goes through this death and resurrection period and is taken over by the devil. And in order to save themselves from this, they have to fight this Antichrist and take him down and take down the United Nations and take down these unifying factors that oppose what they're trying to do. And the way to do that is to start World War III so that the Lamb, who is Jesus in their view, can, along with his chosen believers, pretty much destroy on earth anyone who doesn't agree with their beliefs. In other words, they look for the destruction of the earth to happen. It's a good thing if we destroy the earth. Why? Because they're chosen, they're going to be saved. They don't have to worry about it. They're going to be beamed up into heaven, or they're going to be part of the tribulation force. They're going to be protected. They're going to take down the Antichrist and prepare the earth for those that were beamed up to come back down so that they can all live in the New Jerusalem here on earth. That is the exoteric take on Revelation millions now believe, and why it's important to know this divisive interpretation. You don't have to know it in full. I haven't read all these books. I've read synopsises of most of them to have an idea of what they say. But we need to know what they say because in the United States, when we look at what's going on, these people are taking these fictional books and trying to make them real. So esoterically, then, let's start with the trumpets. Traditionally, in ancient times, trumpets were used to sound the call for battle to begin. But why 7 trumpets? In the Left Behind series, they interpret it again as 7 different battles that will take place. And we're going to go into those 7 battles in video 4 here. In video 3, I'm looking at the 7 trumpets. And the trumpets sounding are Jesus announcing the time for the battle has come so that Jesus can make war as the Lamb on the entire human race. So in short, the Prince of Peace, Jesus, has been turned into the ultimate advocate for war and destruction. It is Jesus who wants us to destroy. It is Jesus who wants us to take out the non-believers. It's Jesus who wants us to start World War III. It's Jesus who is making all this destruction take place. But we don't have to worry because we're either already beamed up into heaven, if we're lucky with 144,000, or we're part of the tribulation force that's taking the Antichrist out. So only the true believers can take over the world once the destruction clears and it's just suddenly remade into something beautiful. None of this fits with the esoteric interpretation. As we have seen, the 7 lamps are chakras. They have 7 stars, which are the symbols of the chakras. With 144,000 points, they have to be open to enter the throne room. And this can only happen when the lion, this was in previous videos, the selfish king, queen-like personality lies down with the lamb, a symbol for being willing to sacrifice our selfish, warring, egotistical, separative ways of being. There's the lamb, who has 7 eyes that can see all negative traits that exist in the 7 chakras within ourselves, and 7 horns that are used to poke out the negative tendencies in the 7 chakras through a process of purification. Now, this process of purification is especially important because when the trumpets sound, the serpent dragon Kundalini will rise. And as I've already said, activate either the tree of good and evil, where we move into separate, opposing, and warring camps, which is strangely enough, the Left Behind series of books is advocating that we become warring camps. Or it will activate the tree of life, where we're able to unify opposing peoples and points of view to create the new Jerusalem or peace on earth. And that's why St. John warns us about the purification work we need to do when the seals are opened. That's video 2. Now, I have these 2 pictures of these fishes because I once had a teacher say that what this is like is we have a bunch of crummy sediment on the bottom, fish poo, and other things, fish food they didn't eat, etc., but mainly fish poo. And when we try to pour fresh water in there, the first thing that will happen is the entire thing will become more cloudy. That's what will happen when Kundalini is activated. If we haven't purified ourselves, it's going to look like this muck. That's what St. John is warning us about. Or if it's purified, when Kundalini happens, it'll just be like, oh, my brother, my sister, the person different from me, big hug. Trumpets have sounded. So let's learn now what these trumpets are all about. Here they are, the sounds of the 7 trumpets. And we're going to go through these. They're the notes of the scales. They're bija sounds in the yoga tradition. And this comes from Yogananda. They can also be heard as a bumblebee, a flute, harp, bell, sea roar, or all sounds. The seals are broken. Hopefully we've done the purification work. Time for expansion of consciousness initiation is here. Let's activate the trumpets. Here they are. First trumpet. When the first trumpet sounds, a plague follows that impacts the earthly elements. Earth having to do with the physical plane. The Muladhara or root chakra is often known as the earth chakra, which is linked to the physical plane. As a reminder, the first horse, when the seal was broken, a horse came out, came with the ability to conquer. But that doesn't mean, this is the previous video 2, go out and conquer others. It meant conquer yourself and your selfish and materialistic tendencies so that you use the resources of the earth to bring about more energy, stability, comfort, and safety, some of the keywords of this chakra. There's other keywords, but that's what's in this particular diagram. Only then can we feel more rooted and secure and help ourselves and others feel more stable so that their lives and minds are free to understand their I amness as spiritual beings. But when greed overcomes us, then we look to conquer others instead. And we use our aggressive and brutal methods to take the earth's resources to enhance our material wealth and happiness at the expense of others. If we've not purified our negative traits, then yes, 1/3 of all trees and grasses on earth could be destroyed. Fires burning like crazy everywhere. I'm in California. We had lots of fires. Australia, lots of fires. Some of them deliberately set. Some of them possibly deliberately set by people that believe in the exoteric version of Revelation. Sadly, humanity's selfish greed has caused global warming. And to date, that's one of the major reasons why everything's getting so hot, that trees and grasslands are being destroyed everywhere. We've been given warnings. Trumpet has sounded for decades. Stop consuming so much of the earth's resources for just a few and so fast. Learn to live more simply. Or the trees and the grass and the rainforest will burn up. But grasses and trees burning has nothing to do with Jesus or the Lamb taking out his vengeance on the non-believers. Prayers are set so that wouldn't happen. But if we're not being good stewards of the earth, then this destruction will and is taking place. That is why we must learn to live more simply, so everybody can simply live. And the earth's resources are used to benefit everyone. It's a good meditation practice to look at your footprint of consumption. How much are you using? Now, maybe you don't have much money and you need more just to survive. Maybe you have a lot of money and you're not being necessarily that generous with it. My PhD dissertation was on wealth and spirituality, and I was looking to see what are the super rich, the 1% in this country, doing with their money? What do different religions say about the right use of money? The trumpet is blowing. It's been blowing for decades. The Muladhara chakra is already being stimulated. The sound of the chakra is being activated. If we're doing the purificatory work, then in our own lives and in our countries, instability, chaos, devitalization, and destruction of the land, plants, trees will not take place. The energy will not go into the side channels of Ida and Pingala and make up the tree of good and evil and cause competition, separation, and division for what the earth has to offer us. Instead, it will go up the central channel and it will unify us so that we live simply enough, that we tone down the desires, the consumption, even in our media, especially in the United States, driven and fed to us every single second. You can't even read an article on the internet anymore without this ad and this ad. Buy, 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 buy. This is the trumpet sounding, and this is the pollution in our Muladhara chakra being activated. We've got to do something about it. But have we done the work? In St. John's story, we have not. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to activate these sounds for you. And as I activate them, here's what I want you to do. I want you to listen to them. And as you listen to them, I want you to think about how we are treating our Mother Earth, how you are treating our Mother Earth. I want you to think about consumption. If you don't have enough, why not? What's going on inside your psyche that you're afraid to get it or that you're powerless? How can you resolve that? And if you have stuff, do you have too much? What do we do about that? How do you know what is the right use of the earth's resources? How are you using the resources that you have? I'm talking to myself too. Are you taking care of them? Are you repairing them instead of just throw it out, get a new one, throw it out, get a new one? How are you using your money? Can you be trusted with money? All of this I want you to meditate on for just a few moments. So I can't do long meditation here. This video would be taking forever. As we sound the note of C, the bija of Lam at this particular level. Here we go. I know it'd be nice to keep going with that, but if you want to do that, I recommend that you actually go and I'll show you the next time we use that video, how to find it on the internet and you actually use it for yourself. And I also wanted to say that the angel is important here because normally you invoke the angel. And St. John talks about that too, as the trumpet is sounding. But I haven't done that because there's disagreement about, in the Western tradition, which angel is which. In the Eastern tradition, there are different deities associated with those chakras, but I didn't add that to the brief meditations we're doing here because in the West, there's disagreement as to which angels, which. You can go on the internet as I did, and some people said it's these archangels, some people said it's these archangels, but there was no consensus. So the second trumpet sounds. A volcano erupts and turns a third of the sea to red. Water, which the sea is made up of, is frequently a symbol for the emotions. And the Swadhisthana chakra is the water chakra. And the chakra is connected to the emotional plane or level of consciousness. Again, the second horse and rider, when the seal was broken, brought about the power to destroy peace or not. That rider warned us that we need to handle our emotions well and treat each other with civility and kindness in order to build a loving community. Then, as the Swadhisthana or sacral chakra opens, we maintain a focus on sharing, connection, community, and sociability, especially with people we don't see eye to eye with or disagree with. We purify the chakra enough that those emotional triggers and reactions, those volcanic eruptions, don't happen and pollute our emotional field. The pleasures we partake in build versus destroy the good of the overall whole. We maintain our equanimity and stay detached from our desires. We don't have so many desires that all we want to do is consume, consume, consume. If we do not do this, then peace is destroyed. Our emotions are whipped up. They blow like a volcano. They create insurrection, having just seen that when I did this video, 2021. Peace is removed from our minds, and we're no longer able to think. So we engage in explosive and mindless behaviors where we're more inclined to slay one another. What a terrible result. Now that's actually, if it's going into the masculine pingala side, the warrior action side. It can go into the feminine Ida side, the passive side, where we just act helpless and are afraid and just want to run and hide and don't know what to do. And incivility now rules, and we make demons of each other. We get overly attached to our desires. We indulge in reactive emotional states. We selfishly insist on having our way to get our desires met, no matter who pays the price. So our racial group can have the goodies, or men can have it over women, or women can have it over men, or the left can have it over the right, or the right gets it over the left. You see these divisions actually going on. This is the tree of good and evil. Peace is removed from our minds, and we increase worry, hate, and fear in the world. Like volcanoes, we erupt and fill our seas, emotional bodies, with metaphorical or actual blood. And the result is 1/3 of all living creatures die. That is happening, isn't it? And 1/3 of all ships that transport our desires and hopes are destroyed or frozen due to a coronavirus, making it difficult. Animals are dying, and our ability to transport our desires is being destroyed. But it's being destroyed not because it's some good thing, according to the exoteric version, and it's proof that Jesus, who likes to be a great, vengeful human being, is coming to make sure that my tribe, my way of thinking, my right way, gets to inherit the goodies of earth and everybody else gets destroyed. That's the tree of good and evil. It's that we want to stop, want to purify ourselves. We want to sacrifice the lamb, see the eye, and poke out with the horn our negative emotional and reactive tendencies of incivility, hate, and emotional reactivity. We want that to die down. We want emotional calm to prevail. So before we meditate, this is 7 chakra chants by All 7 Chakras Healing Chants by Meditative Mind. And they have 3.59 million subscribers. So you can surely find it yourself if you would like to, in case you want to do the whole video, which is an hour long. But as we do just at the most a minute, maybe 30 seconds of this, sounding it, I want you to meditate on what are areas where you have emotional triggers? What are areas where you are in fear? Where you're either collapsing into helplessness or feeling overly combative and not being calm enough and with enough equanimity to balance out different people's or points of view. Let's meditate. know, it's always abrupt when I do that. I can't help it. The third trumpet impacts the rivers, which can easily be associated with the mental plane, where streams of thought flow out. As a reminder, the horseman here was given scales that were used in a fair and balanced way. That's when the third seal was opened. As we examine the rivers of our thought, or the rivers through the internet or ethernet, we need to take time to be sure that our thoughts and opinions of ourselves and others are balanced, fair, and just, so that we can empower what ourselves and others say and do in the right kind of way. Especially, we need to learn to give the disempowered what they need so that their bodies and souls can flourish. If we're not fair, balanced, and just, then these rivers of thought become poisonous. They may even flow into a collective sea or internet, creating division and prejudice. In this now poisonous atmosphere, those disempower others so they can dominate and rule over them. They take from others without allowing even the meek and the weak to have the necessities to survive. Remember, St. John said that they need to have enough wine and oil so that they can survive. The horseman is told that should not be touched. Our poisonous prejudices and confused minds then cause us to wrongly believe it is our God-given right to dominate, punish, and abuse others. Now, this chakra is also associated with fire. As the trumpet blows, the consequences of these toxic rivers of thought in our collective thought are revealed, and we're asked to examine our thought life. Why do we believe what we believe? How clear, free from distortion, have our thoughts and beliefs been? And especially, this has been one of the real challenges of the internet and things like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So much information is out there now. So much is going through the rivers, the ethers, the internet. But how do we know what's true and what's not true? Remember, the very first thing we were given is a two-edged sword. That's in video 1. How clear are we? Do we take time to pause, calm the emotions down, inquire, look into what's the source, how reliable is the source? I'm not saying I'm free from all this myself. I'm not 144,000 of my petals and points purified. They're good questions for all of us. How careful are we to ensure that our thoughts and speech empower versus disempower others, versus, guilty as charged at times, emotionally reacting and throwing that internet meme out there for everybody to read before I've really calmed down and checked it, or throwing it in somebody else's face to read, this will show you're wrong and I'm right, instead of calm down and how do I empower this other person to be more clear? Are we giving into the idea that might makes right, because we cannot truly see how the right and the left need to unite and go up the central channel? We want to mentally get into our position and point of view and fire up and get other people to get fired up and rallied with us so we can force that other side to eat it. So we must face the purification work we need to do. How much have we done so far? Are we really willing to sacrifice the lamb and see with the eye and poke out with the horn the negative tendencies in this chakra that lead to our distortions, our prejudices, our assumptions, our misplaced use of power? Going back to the church connected to the chakra that St. John condemned, Laodicea, we also need to be sure that we're not lazy, lackadaisical, it's related to Laodicea, about doing this work. That's like going up the Ida channel. Oh, I just ignore it, pretend all that negativity is not out there. I'll just passively believe everything I read. And oh my gosh, that's true, whether it may just be totally false, whatever. We just take it easy, live our lives, refuse to act, refuse to discern, refuse to do research. We can either be aggressive, fiery, that's the pingala, or overly passive, that's the Ida, with this. So once more, we're going to meditate for just a few seconds. And we're going to take a look at, why do we believe what we believe? How are we being with our thoughts, with our beliefs, with empowering or disempowering others, with getting either too fired up or too passive? Here we go. The fourth trumpet is sounding. Oh, it all came up all at once. Oh, well. And again, a third of the moon and the sun and the stars all lost their light, and all of this stuff where we had only light for 8 hours a day. Now, air is associated with this chakra. And as we see, most of these symbols reside in the air or sky. Light is also associated with the intuitional plane. When intuition lights our way, we see clearly what to do, and that action helps not only ourselves, but the greater good. We have clear seeing, clear vision. We have, where there's no vision, the people perish. That's when we don't have it. As a reminder, the horseman associated with this chakra is given the power of death. Now that's not, as exoteric people believe, to join some tribulation force, make World War III happen, and go out there and try and find the Antichrist and kill off anybody that doesn't agree with you. It's to conquer and kill off our own egotistical tendencies. And if we cannot kill off selfish, separative, and divisive tendencies that pollute the anahata or heart chakra, we block the capacity to receive light from the higher realms. Intuitions no longer flow, helping us resolve our difficulties and problems. That love energy that's associated with this heart chakra turns into hate. Empathy and compassion for each other wither. And hate can lead to literal death as more and more people lose the light and become blind to what unites them as they focus only on what divides them. Again, I'm in 2021 recording this. We have seen this happening. The heart, the love energy is being cut out, and hopefully it's going to come back. So love, inclusiveness, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, understanding, without these serious dangers exist. If we attempt to awaken the chakra and force it open prematurely, we should never work on these chakras to try and gain some sort of power, only to try and use them as meditative states to purify ourselves. Humility, then, is an essential quality that needs to be developed here. Humility can only be cultivated if we kill off or destroy our selfish and egotistical tendencies. Humility is only cultivated as we put things in perspective, which is something that happens when we view things like sun, moon, stars, sky, mountains. It brings us a sense of vastness, awe, and wonder, and we realize how much bigger the world is than ourselves. For this reason, we are much more likely to serve greater and greater wholes. Another trumpet sounds, and ideally, we hear the sound of a bell that can be heard without having to strike two hands together, reminding us of the Zen koan of what is the sound of one hand clapping. That sound is the sound of our soul. It can never be touched or destroyed, especially as we seek unity with others and allow them to touch our hearts. So let's meditate now. How much love, inclusiveness, compassion, empathy, forgiveness, and understanding and humility do we possess? Where are we not having that? Where do we need to gain it? Again, just for a few seconds, we'll meditate. The fifth seal is open, and we're told the dead come back to life and are given white robes and the power to avenge those who had killed them if they choose to do so. As this fifth trumpet is sounded, a meteor falls to earth and a shaft opens up, and these bizarre looking locusts come out. And they're given power to torture men for all this time. And the locust king is called Abaddon, a word which means doom, or Apollon, a word which means destroyer. And they're also known as the first woe. Let's learn about who these locusts then really are esoterically before we sound the trumpet. So, looking at these creatures, we see that they're an inversion of the four creatures we saw in the throne room: the lion, the human, the eagle, and we'll look at the bull for a moment. These represented the fixed cross, or those who were on the spiritual path, and they're related to Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio. Aquarius is the human. Now remember, locusts have human faces. In its higher nature, Aquarius taps into the ethers or ethernet or internet and dispenses thought waves through it that help humans tap into spiritual ethereal waves of thought. On the darker side, Aquarius pollutes the ethers of thought, whether it's in books or internet or whatever media, with lies and deception. Leo the lion. The locusts wear crowns, have hair like women, and teeth like lions. It's kind of like lion's hair. And they're crowned. The lion is the king of the jungle, or queen. On the spiritual side, the lion is the integrated personality that willingly lies down with the lamb, video 2, so its many talents and gifts are put to sacrificial service to benefit the greater whole. On the darker side, the lion makes no sacrifices and just wants to relish in its power, seeking to reign as the supreme queen, king, dictator. Now, Scorpio, the eagle or scorpion, is next. And we see that the locusts have scales like iron breastplates, kind of like a scorpion has. And they have tails like scorpions. In its higher nature, Scorpio is the eagle or phoenix that has vision and perspective. Because the bigger picture is seen, Scorpios are very patient, and they are able to act by keeping their emotional impulses in check. They make really good psychotherapists. They deal with a lot of toxic stuff, and they're able to handle it well. As the scorpion impulse dominates, however, the lower side, grudges are held. The person stews on emotional stuff. We used to call it stamp booking as a relationship counselor. You know, it's like, you did that wrong. You did that wrong. It's like you put these little stamps in so you can collect them together and cash them in, or maybe like Google Play points or something would be now. Cash them in for my vindictive revenge. Now you have to do this for me because all these bad things that happened. So the time comes where impulse for revenge is let loose. You cash in your stamps. You want to wreak havoc on the world and its resources around you. Now, we've seen these three animals easily pictured here, but there's one that isn't so easily pictured: Taurus the bull. Here we find something curious, because instead of seeing the feet of a bull, though in a way it kind of looks like bull's feet, we're told that it's the feet of the horse by St. John. In my mind, this symbolizes a regression back to the sign Sagittarius, which in its lower level is a centaur. The centaur is a man or woman who is fused now with their animal tendencies and lower nature. They can't get out of it. They're not a rider on a horse, they're fused with it. And St. John, I believe, is showing us how we've regressed back to the mutable cross that Sagittarius is on, where spiritual goals no longer guide us. Sagittarius on the lower side is also a fanatic in its lower levels and reveals the fanatical way these locusts take out their revenge. Now, the omission of Taurus the bull and the regression backward into Sagittarius is significant in another way. Having regressed back, we note how it will now take 5 months. They're tortured for 5 months as we move from Sagittarius to Taurus. Sagittarius is the archer who launches the arrow to hit the bullseye, the eye of the bull, the third eye. Now, that arrow is launched in late November when Sagittarius starts, and hits the bullseye in late April, or somewhere it will hit it exactly at the full moon of Taurus, actually, and that varies between late April to, well, it's usually in the beginning to the middle of May. And when that happens, we see that the things we wished for in Santa Claus time of late November and December, if those things that we wished for have guided us for better or worse. If we've hit the bullseye of Taurus, our vision has been true and guided us by higher intuition. If we miss the mark, a phrase often associated with sin, then we will reap the consequences for our lack of clarity and true vision. Now, this video is getting awfully long, so I'm actually going to skip this part. If you want to pause it, you can read it. Oh, you'll have to pause really fast. But it's about the different values that exist that also need to be worked with. I want to wrap this video up. The fifth trumpet opens the Vishuddha, or the throat chakra, that connects us with the power of speech, expression, communication, and creativity. Words have power. They can heal or kill. What do we do with our words? Negatively, we use our words to harm, divide, spread fear and hate. We use our words to fill our surroundings with lies and deceptions. Words become a major tool of revenge, destroying reputations as well as lives. We create images. This is a creative chakra. In arts, movies, media, and sounds, music, speeches, opinions that cause division and degrade our sense of who we are when we're using it in a destructive way. When we sacrifice these negative tendencies and resist the influence to harm those we feel have harmed us, words heal, unite, inspire, they clarify. And we think before we speak or create, making sure our words and creations, whether it's music or whatever, or art, are true, harmless, insightful, necessary, and kind. Think. The need for revenge diminishes. Love and truth prevail. Before we meditate, I was going to say that 5-month period has to do with the 5 values and some of the purification that has to happen in those channels as well. So you have to hit that pause button really fast. I didn't intend to click forward so fast. But if you want to go back and read that will educate you on some further purification work that needs to happen in that 5-month period. Let's meditate. And as we meditate, we're going to meditate on the things that we say and create, and also the things that we watch and listen to. Is it feeding the tree of good and evil? Is it lowering our energy and making the lights and the lamps go out? Or is it inspiring and feeding that energy and lighting those points or those petals up? All right, we're coming to the end of the video. The 6th trumpet sounds. Now 4 angels come forward and release the river Euphrates. I'm not going to read all this. We kind of read it before, St. John's version. But, you know, all this destruction, by the way, the riders, I do want to say this. So 1/3 of mankind is now killed, with twice 10,000 times 10,000 troops being released to kill them. And the riders have breastplates with the color of fire and sapphire and sulfur, which is yellow. Here we see that yellow represented down here. Now, interestingly enough, the heads of the horses are like lions' heads with tails like serpents. So we have a Leo Scorpio thing going on there. They kill mankind with fire, sulfur, and smoke. So combined with a third of humanity killed earlier, 2/3 of humanity is destroyed. And yet the final third still doesn't want to stop worshiping demons, idols of gold, silver, bronze, wood, and repent their murders, sorcerers, immoralities, and theft. So as a reminder, the sixth seal has to do with vision. And where there's no vision, people perish. We don't see mountains and all of that kind of thing. I'm going to kind of skip through this because it's kind of a repeat of what I've said before. But St. John is showing us that when we have vision, when we have clear seeing, when we have lucidity and clarity, then even the powerful and weak run in confusion and fear when the truth wills out. They may even run in horror as they realize that there are, after all, consequences for their actions. So can we likewise wake up and see the deeper spiritual realities? Can we sacrifice our separation, hate, and fear? Can we see how we are too prone to materialistic tendencies? Can we clearly see both sides of every issue as well as the common ground that unites them? Are we averse to having discernment, wanting to mush ideas and points of view together too quickly so we no longer preserve diversity within that unity? A lot of people like in spiritual areas like to say, I'm a non-dualist, as they discount and refute your point of view. Well, you can't be a non-dualist and be opposed to duality. That's duality. You have to be a non-dual dualist. That is, you have to learn to accept there's unity and diversity. Finally, are we capable of having a broad enough vision that we're inspired by it? And even more important, that we're able to inspire others to point their arrows towards a vision that is unifying people and that they can remain steady enough to hit the bullseye so that vision becomes real. Let's meditate again here. So 6 trumpets have sounded. Now St. John encounters another angel coming down from heaven. This one is in a cloud with a rainbow over its head. And note, a rainbow symbolizes the rainbow bridge that has to be crossed to reach into heaven or get into the throne room. His face is like the sun, and his legs are like 2 pillars with fire. And he holds a scroll in his hand. He's giving the scroll to St. John. And he sets his right foot in the sea and his left foot on the land. Here's the temperance card from the tarot, kind of showing that here. And it's my belief that this symbolizes the Ida and Pingala channels and their male-female energies. When the angel speaks, 7 thunders sound, and St. John is told up to seal the 7 thunders and what they have said to him and not write it down. Now, these might be the bija sounds that we were listening to, lam, vam, etc. Then the 7th trumpet sounds, and the mystery of God is announced to the prophets, and St. John is given the scroll that is in the angel's hand and told to eat it. The angel also says that when he eats the scroll, it will taste sweet as honey to his mouth, but bitter to his stomach, meaning as the Kundalini rises, it will be sweet to his soul, but bitter to his personality, his selfish, egotistical side. I also want to comment here on what the yoga tradition means by mouth, because it sounds kind of strange to eat a scroll. not if you understand the esoteric tradition. To let you know, the mouth of God is associated with something known as the Ultra Major Center. And St. John is not saying he should eat a scroll with a human mouth. He's referring to a process that takes place as an individual gets ready to enter samadhi. So I'm going to explain a little more here. Here's the mouth of God, or the medulla oblongata in the brain. That is connected to something known as the Ultra Major Center. I found this little icon when I was looking for rainbow on Microsoft, and it's interesting because it's going into and out of a mouth here. And that's because the rainbow bridge is really what we have to do to bridge the gap from the throat chakra up into the Ultra Major Center by, in a way, eating this minor scroll here, the second scroll, this minor scroll. Now, something interesting about this particular region of the body is that it has to do with breathing, blood pressure, heartbeat, swallowing, alertness and sleep, body temperature, and digestion. When people go into a state of samadhi, they basically have their breathing slow down, their blood pressure drop. Some yogis even know how to make their heartbeat stop. We typically don't swallow anymore. We are in what's called like a half state, where we're kind of awake and asleep at the same time. We're in the world and not of it. We're in a place where we are not really aware of what's going on in the world around us, but we're not asleep either. We're sitting upright in meditation. So after this happens, where he eats the scroll with his mouth, he's given a measuring staff, and he has to measure the altar of God. And he's told not to measure the court outside the temple, as it's given to the nations who will trample on it for 42 months, which is 3.5 years. Then 2 witnesses appear that look like 2 olive trees, and each of them has a lampstand. And we're told, St. John says, if anybody attempts to harm them, fire is going to pour out of their mouths and kill their foes. And they're going to prophesy for 1,260 days, which 3 years equals 1,095 days. 165 days is nearly half a year, or basically 3.14. In other words, about 3.5 years. After these olive trees prophesy, a beast comes up from a bottomless pit to conquer and kill them. And their dead bodies lie in the streets for 3.5 days. And during that time, everyone rejoices that they are dead. But after 3.5 days, they come back to life. And then the foes of the prophets go up into heaven in a cloud, and a great earthquake happens. 1/10 of the city falls. 7,000 people are killed in an earthquake, and the rest are terrified, but they give glory and go to heaven. This is the end of the second woe. What is this altar? Well, to begin with, it's the square that's found as the main symbol of Muladhara at the base of the spine chakra. And here the altar preparations are being made for the rising of the Kundalini, or dragon, up the spine. That altar can also be seen as the pelvic area of the body that houses the coccyx, where the tailbone of the serpent is. Kind of right here. We saw that in the previous video of that chiropractor that looked like the dragon and the snake. The tail will rattle once the scroll Kundalini has entered the mouth, activated the Ultra Major Center. St. John is also told that the court outside the temple is not to be measured, and that the nations will trample within the courtyard for 42 months, 3.5 years. And here we get the first introduction to something important numerology-wise that St. John is talking about, especially connected to the base of the spine and 3.5. Here is a up-close view of a tailbone. Now, some people say that this tailbone, or coccyx, is 4 bones. You can see it that way, 1, 2, 3, 4. But some say it's also 3 and like a half here. So there's some symbolism there. Now we're going to look at the world egg, where a serpent is coiled around the egg 3.5 times. This particular one isn't correct. It's showing 4 times. Really, it's like 3.5. I guess this is the half here, not quite all the way around. Here we get a reference to 3 channels with 7 chakras up the main channel that can be divided in half. 7 divided by 2 makes 3.5. And it also makes 2 channels of Ida and Pingala. And we also see a connection with something interesting, pi, which is connected to the idea of infinity. So let's begin with a circle. Here we have a circle, and remember, Kundalini has to do with being a circle. It's circular and annular. Circles have both a circumference and a diameter that cuts it in half. If the diameter is 7, interestingly enough, circumference is 22 chapters in Revelation. And this 22-7 relationship has been made into a coefficient given the name pi. So if you make 3.5 coils in that ratio of pi, with one overlapping the other, and draw a line through the center, it then uncoils into 7 parts. There's some significance there for you in what St. John is pointing us to. So the Kundalini is uncoiling and going into 2 parts. Those are 2 witnesses, which are 2 trees, and they each have their own lampstand, the way that the light can go up each. But if we try and harm them, if we try and work with them in the wrong way, then the fires of the Kundalini will operate in a way that is not healthy at first. We have to wait for them to prophesize. And part of that is perhaps a literal period of time, 1,260 days. And part of that is also that which has to do with this pi association again. My mind's digressing for a moment because I had an inspiration as I read this. We are told if anyone attempts to harm them, fire pours forth from their mouths and they kill their foes. Those foes are the impure tendencies. You know, as we go up these 2 olive tree channels here, Ida and Pingala, the foes are the impure tendencies that have to be thrown into the fire and killed. After they prophesy, a beast comes up, to move this picture myself so I can read, from a bottomless pit, which means the personality tendencies that do not want to be transformed try to appropriate the Ida Pingala energies to go back into that separative battle here. And their dead bodies are on the streets for 3.5 days. And during that time, everybody's excited. Yay, they're dead. We can just, the impure tendencies can just go at it and not worry about it. But then they come back to life. And the foes of the prophets, the impure elements, go up into heaven in a cloud. A great earthquake happens, like that lightning that creates that earthquake. Those kinds of analogies happen. 1/10 of the city falls. Now, I don't have time to get into all this here because I'd have to go into a lot of explanation, but that has to do with this tree of life as represented by the Kabbalah. 7,000 people, 1,000 times 7. 1,000 is the number for the head center of the 7 centers. 1,000 can also symbolize infinity, are killed in an earthquake. Those are the impure tendencies, and the rest give glory to heaven, go into samadhi. Coming to the last few slides here. So there's a lot more mystery to this pi than I think I've been able to discover myself. But I also want to say that 3 stands for 3 states of consciousness experienced by all humans: waking, sleeping, and dreaming. But there is another state that we can enter into, again, where we're seemingly asleep and yet awake, and that's samadhi. Through progressive levels of samadhi, we learn to be awake to the divinity within us. Samadhi then is the half state, where we are both aware of the internal realms of transcendent consciousness at the highest levels of samadhi, and yet aware of the external world as well, in the world and not of it, to use a Christian phrase. 3 also stands for the past, present, and future of linear consciousness, while the half represents the capacity to transcend or suspend linear time, which connects with St. John's statement of being in touch with the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. Finally, I want to comment on the book, The Life of Pi. I once had a radio program. I interviewed all kinds of amazing people. I was given the book, Life of Pi, and asked to interview the author before it was published. I really regret that now. It was a fiction book. I didn't usually review fiction books. It became a really popular movie and a bestseller. I should have interviewed that author when I had the chance. But in this book, a young man named Pi, for short, ends up traveling on a boat with a tiger. He learns to ride with a tiger, and learning to ride with a tiger is another symbol for Kundalini in the ocean of infinite consciousness. So, aware of this, I invite you to read this book and attempt to read it with new eyes to get the author's deeper symbolism. We are at the final slide. It's time for the seventh trumpet to sound. St. John says, the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and his Christ and shall reign forever and ever. The 24 elders give thanks to God. Time for the dead to be judged. God's temple in heaven is opened, and the Ark of the Covenant is seen within his temple. This is the Ark of the Covenant, which flashes lightning and loud noises, thunder, earthquake, heavy hail. It's wrong. One more slide. This is the last slide. All the chakras have now been unsealed and stimulated into motion by the trumpets, the sounds of the chakras. We've lifted into the throne room, or the kingdom of heaven, where Christ consciousness. Christ is a title which is related to Krishna, which was related to Krishna, who predated Christ, which is related to Buddha, or the Buddhic plane, or Buddhic consciousness, where this level of consciousness can take hold and reside within the Ark of the Covenant. This is the unified and purified consciousness that the saints have reached, as all 144,000 points of the stars, petals, lotus blossoms have been opened. 24 elders that allow us to stay aware of the divine 24/7 and act as a protective force around the Alpha and Omega, the heart of God, 12 ribs on each side. Give thanks to God. But the story is far from over. The chakras are being awakened, but there is a judgment day coming. How much purification has really taken place? The chakras are being stimulated, but we've not yet done the work really. We have fierce battles still coming up. Those fierce battles are what we'll talk about in the next video. But for now, let's simply meditate. And as we do, we're going to hear this sound, NG, ning. I want to make a comment about this, because a lot of different traditions put Om, the sound of God, Om here, the Om or the Amen, some traditions use it, as well as here. See the same symbol here? But why then do we have NG? I'm going to share something. There was a period in my life when I meditated extensively. I meditated 4 hours a day for 2 years. And I started to have this experience, and this is before I had really any of this training. I was just intuitively being led. I had a little bit of training. I was just doing my own thing, and I've spent the rest of my life trying to figure out what I was doing. But one of the things that happened is I started to hear this ning sound. Only I heard it kind of like this. I'd go, Om. My computer wants to know if I'm playing music. Set up my audio settings. No, I won't. So anyway, the idea here is that it was like a bell ringing is what I experienced. And that's what I believe this ning sound to be. I want to get rid of you. I don't want you. Go away. So let's meditate on that Om sound and let it ring and sound out with infinite amplitude. It's always kind of hard to stop that. But you can go find that video and you can do it yourself if you'd like. You won't have the tones that I've put with it. I like that sustaining sound underneath it, but you will have that marvelous video to work with. So you've stayed with me for a very long time. I know I always try and make these videos short. They never are. There's just so much I have to share with you. I don't have to, but I desire to share. I give to share. If you want to give something back and support this work, you can do so easily by subscribing to this channel. You can also like any of these videos, or you can become a Patreon. There is the link. It's patreon.com Wise Productions Inc. I also have gifts for you if you want to do that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this video has been helpful to you and that you have a marvelous day and the rest of the week. Thank you.